Welcome to Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist. Today I'm chatting with Dr. Rachel Kowert about the science of digital games. Rachel is a science, games, and technology policy and product advisor and a researcher. She focuses on mental health and trust and safety in digital games and game-adjacent spaces. She is founder of Psychgeist, a multimedia content production studio for the intersection of science and games, which includes a YouTube channel and a book series published by Play Story Press. And she is doing her best to make the digital world a better place. Rachel, welcome to Confessions of Cyberpsychologists. It's so lovely to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely intro.
You're welcome. So, Rachel, before we get chatting about the work and research that you do, can you tell me a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what that pivot point was for you that got you down the road of cyberpsychology?
Sure. I'm, as you said, a research psychologist. I wanted to be a therapist for as long as I can remember. And when I went to get my master's to train to become a therapist, I realized early on that I actually didn't want to do that as my everyday job. But I knew that what I was learning there was going to be important. It was going to help me. It was really interesting. So as I continued through that program and I was doing therapy, as you do to become a therapist, I was seeing a lot of people coming in with concerns about games, digital games, online games specifically. It was 2008-ish, so it was like peak World of Warcraft, EverQuest. That was very popular at the time. And there were a lot of questions from parents like, is this doing something to harm my children? Should I be worried they're spending so much time in online games? And there wasn't any research to answer those questions. And so that's really how my journey began. I played games my whole life. I never actually thought studying games could be a career, but here we are. That was really the point where I was like, all right, I'm going to go do a research-based PhD. I did it at the University of York in the UK, which was amazing. And I looked at the uses and effects of online games. And then my career just kind of moved on from there.
Who would have thought a few decades ago that you could do a career in gaming?
I know, not me. Not me, for sure.
What fun. It's almost like if you had to think back to the previous century, it's like doing a career in Monopoly. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
but we just
No
do.
one.
It's amazing. So you specialize in the science of games and the impacts they have on mental health, trust, and safety. And many parents are concerned about the impact of online games on their children's mental health. Could you talk a bit about the positives and then some of the downsides of online gaming?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, understandably, around the impact of mental health in games. Like that hasn't changed. That was my impetus in the beginning, 2008. Right now we're in 2024, and those questions are still just as relevant. I think the best place to start is like big picture. It's more positive than negative, which I think can, allay some fears. The impact of games on mental health generally is we see reduction of loneliness, sense of community, stress relief, increase in creativity, like all these positive outcomes. In terms of the downsides, the number one concern from parents, and there's two concerns. One is about the content they're consuming, and one is about the sheer number of time being spent in these spaces. In terms of content, generally speaking, media content doesn't impact us very much. It may reinforce preconceived notions, but it's not going to turn someone from one thing into something completely different just from the content of the media. So a violent video game is not going to make someone commit a violent crime. We know that for sure, patently. In terms of time spent, questions about game addiction or misuse of games, those sorts of things. Again, there's no magic number, but also time spent in and of itself is not really a good indicator of whether something's a problem or not. For the parents who are concerned that games may be having a negative impact, what you need to think about is why games are being used or misused. Is it fulfilling a need, an unmet need for socialization? Is it fulfilling an unmet need for achievement? And those are the things we need to talk about and unpack. It's not the game itself that is the source of the problem. At least the research has not indicated that.
Yeah. So it sounds as though the game is fulfilling a need that is not being met in the offline world. So they may have something that they're struggling with. So it might be like during COVID, they were trying to get away, escape from the fear and the loneliness and all that stuff and trying to build communities. So there was a real need state that games
Yeah.
fulfilled. And it's
Yeah.
offline stuff that actually influences the online stuff more than potentially the other way around.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up COVID as an example because I have a neighbor. I think I told you the story already, but I didn't say it on a recording. So here we are. I have a neighbor who I love dearly. And during COVID, she had a teenage boy who was playing a lot of Minecraft, a lot of hours of Minecraft, but he was playing with people he knew from school. So in Canada, COVID lockdown was a long time. And he was being really creative and just playing with people that he already knew. And she was really upset about the amount of time. And I kept trying to say to her, it's not the amount of time. Look at the function. What is it serving, right? It's COVID. He can't go outside. He can't see his friends, right? It's creative. It's social. He's having a good time. It's having a positive impact on his mental health. But she was very concerned with the sheer number of time and that must indicate something negative. And it doesn't. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it is during the COVID time.
Yeah, because a lot of parents talk about screen time and they
Yes.
equate whatever is happening about how much time you're staring at a screen rather than what you're doing. And
What
I
you're doing. Exactly.
yeah. And it kind of translates then into the gaming world of they're spending the time rather the blocks of time rather than the functionality and the need states that it's actually fulfilling. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Very concise. You said it better than me.
With all of that, during COVID, you started a multimedia content production studio called Psychgeist.
Yeah.
And tell me more about that because you've got loads of videos on YouTube, and you've also
You.
got a book project. But if you can talk about the YouTube channel that you started in 2020 during
Yeah.
lockdown.
Yeah. We all needed COVID hobbies. Mine was content production. um, during COVID, I needed something to do with my time because I suddenly had a lot more of it. And I thought I would make a YouTube channel because I have a lot of knowledge in my mind about games and the uses and effects. And there's a lot of questions from parents about it. And I thought, oh, well, instead of answering parents individually, these questions I do answer individually when I go to events, I'll just make a video. And so I started with this commitment of making one video a week for a year, which I did do in 2020. Never to meet that same production schedule again, but it set a standard. And I talked about things like video games and violence and video game addiction. And I thought I was creating a tool for parents. What I was actually creating was a tool for people who were studying games, which is great. I have an audience and I serve them well, and I'm very happy for that. And also, if I knew how great it would be to just send a link when people ask me questions about things, I would have done this a long time ago. So I do have the channel now. It has over 200 videos. It generally talks about the science of games. That then expanded into a book series from Play Story Press. There's some right there. Stranger Things is the latest in the book series, which is a psychology of essentially series where we look at icons in pop culture and we break them down and we look at the psychological mechanisms behind them. So, for example, in Stranger Things, there's a chapter on Eddie and how he is a representative of non-toxic masculinity. So it's like taking a character and then breaking a little more sciencey, or the nostalgia of 80s music for people who are watching Stranger Things. There's a chapter on that. And there's going to be 20 books in the first series of this series of books. There's 6 of them out now. And what I love about Play Story Press is the PDFs are always free. So you can go to my website, you can find the links. Anyone can read the content. Obviously, the paperbacks are pretty. Like, I don't know who wouldn't want them on their shelf. But if that's not an option, you can read all the content for free. So it's been a really fun kind of COVID-born project that continues on.
And you are pulling these together with other cyber-psychologists, aren't you?
Yes. I'm the series editor. So like the series was my idea and I curate the topics and then I curate the editors. So for instance, Anton Roberts was editor of Stranger Things. He's a PhD student in the UK, actually film studies PhD student. And so people get to make books. I love to facilitate people being able to make books about the topics they're passionate about. So I did The Witcher as the first one. Anyone who knows me knows I'm obsessed with The Witcher. So I actually edited that book. But then my friend Jess, she loves The Mandalorian and Boba Fett. So she did one on that. Anton loves Stranger Things. So I'm happy to be able to be the facilitator of bringing these books to life. And every once in a while, I do one. I did The Witcher. Next month in December 2024, I'm publishing another one on Taylor Swift. So I'm doing a couple.
They're quite time consuming, aren't they? And putting together all that
Yes.
content.
Yes, they are quite they take about a year to make from start to finish. Yeah.
And who are the type of people who read those books?
Good question. The idea is that it was made equally for fans as it was for like intro level year one university students. So when I talk to the authors who work on these books, I say, like, if I wanted to teach a class on trauma and I didn't want to use a regular textbook on trauma and I want to use the chapter in The Witcher on Ciri and how trauma can be viewed through the paths of Ciri through The Witcher, like, I wanted to have enough scientific weight that I could use it in that context, but be easy to read, that if, like, my mother who likes The Witcher wants to read it, she could follow it and understand what's in it. So we're trying to bridge the gap between scientific communication to a general audience.
That is fascinating because there's quite a number of cyber psychology books that are quite academic with lots of academic research, which is fabulous, but it can be really difficult for people to read if they're not used to reading academic research. But also,
For sure.
when you're going into a whole new subject area, there's new language, there's new terminology, there's new concepts, there's new things to get your head around. It's quite a lot of thinking. So to be able to relate it back to something that people already know is such a
Yeah.
nice way of bringing it to life and making it easy to consume and easy to digest and go, oh, yes, I get that. And this is what you're telling me about. And it related to that. Okay, I now get that. I don't have to think so hard about it, but it's based on
Yeah.
academic findings and academic research.
Yeah. Yes, you're selling it. That was the idea. That was the idea. Because I feel like it's a lot easier. I mean, I don't actively teach at the moment, but I was in this course back when I was in school called American Studies, and you had like a freedom to choose. And it's like, well, if I had to choose between reading a dry chapter on resiliency, or I could read about The Witcher and resiliency, I'm gonna pick The Witcher. And so I wanted to create the books that I wish I had when I was in school.
Oh, I love that. It's right books that you wish you'd been able to read,
Yeah. Yeah,
knowing
that were
what you know
available to me.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
make it easy to get ahead of these concepts, get your head around them all.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in the meantime, like, write love letters to our favorite fandoms, which is also how I think of them. Like, especially like the Taylor Swift one is coming out, and we talk about the patriarchy, and we talk about the references to English literature and her lyrics. And it is really academic and scholarly, but like, I just read it, I'm just nerding out over how much I just love it and how it just really feels like a love letter to everything we love about Taylor Swift as a songwriter.
But it also makes you think the psychological side of it as well. It's not
Yes,
just about
absolutely.
consuming media and consuming
No.
contents, but why, what's going on, what else, and kind of getting you into the mindset of training you. And I often used to say to people, because I did marketing in my previous life, and I always
Mm.
say to students that I was lecturing to, that going to a degree is not to teach you how to do the job, it's teaching you how to think about the job and teaching you a way of thinking that actually
That's
makes
it.
you ready to be able to do the work, because it's so different in every single sphere you go into. So you have to train your brain to
Yes,
think in a very specific way. So this is
you
such a
do.
nice,
Yeah,
easy
thank
way
you.
to kind of get
That's
your
the
head around it.
idea. And it's also about not just thinking about it, but communicating about it. Because as academics, we could do some work. And especially our written communication, I find that's actually the biggest hurdle when doing these books is people will give me a first draft of a chapter and it's like an academic article, and it's like, no, like, explain it to me like I'm five, like, let's step back. And it's a real challenge for a lot of us to do that. It's also a real skill to develop, but it will serve you well, not only if you become a lifelong academic, but if you have any job outside of academia, that skill is so important to develop.
Yeah, makes it human.
Yes.
Makes it
Yes.
very basic. Not basic human, that sounds awful, but it just a general human.
General human, that every human can relate. But that's the cool thing about psychology, right? Because every human can relate these basic concepts. We all experience them. We're all human. And so,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Makes it think about ourselves as well.
Hmm.
And you've conducted quite a lot of research on various topics around gaming. So I'm going to read off the list of all this research because there's been so many different areas. So, and I'd love you to talk about kind of what the top line findings about all of these, and we can go into in depth if you want to, or just do a general overview. So the topics that you've researched are extremism and radicalization in digital games, mental health in digital games, hate, harassment, and dog participation, which sounds fascinating, general uses and effects of digital games, and the metaverse. So, what kind of things have you found out about each of these different areas that you think people really need to know?
Oh gosh. Well, general uses and effects of games. I'll start there because that's the most generalized one. That was really kind of where I started. When I pitched my PhD, you do an interview and they say, "What do you want to study?" And I said, "I want to study the impact of games on adaptive functioning." That was my pitch. I said, "Physical, social, psychological well-being. What is the impact?" And they were like, "That's cute. That's way too big of a question for a PhD. Little old me." Oh, right. So, I've always been curious because the questions that parents have always been broad. So I've done, a couple of books called The Video Game Debate with Routledge, which are edited collections, which really look at the general uses and effects of games. It's written by a bunch of scholars, how they affect physical health, violence and aggression, community, blah, blah, blah. Again, the top line is more positive than negative. Of course, there are some nuances in that as well. The extremism and radicalization work is the most recent work that I finished. It was a 2-year project. It ended in August of 2024. It was the first project funded by the Department of Homeland Security looking at the landscape of extremism in games. So this is going from like, games are great and aren't they fun in community, to like whatever the opposite of that would be. That work was really interesting and really important. We are seeing, a significant amount of exploitation in our gaming spaces. There are certainly gaps in our trust and safety protocols to kind of prevent them from being leveraged in nefarious ways by people who would want to do harm. The top line of that is we're working on it. I do think that the industry has caught up certainly to recognizing that there is, some gaps here in the safety and security of these spaces, and now we're trying to figure out what are the best ways to fill them. And then the metaverse. I love that you mentioned that. The metaverse was real big in 2020, 2021. I had more quotes in better outlets about the metaverse than I did for anything in like the 10 years prior of any of my research. When I talk about it, I mostly talk about the metaverse as being like, we have it. Fortnite, I would say, is certainly a metaverse. What have I found out about it? That people hate the word metaverse, and that metaverse is not an idealized future, but it is like what we already have here with, like I said, like platforms like Fortnite.
Because there's quite a number of companies back in 2020, 21 who are kind of doing the big compete for the metaverse environment, and
Yeah.
Meta even or Facebook even changed their name to Meta to be the cutting edge. They are going to own the metaverse, and all the VR and AR and all the immersive stuff. But it really has petered out now that
Oh, for
AI
sure.
is now the big thing. So
AI is definitely the big thing now, and I think that people realize that we had it wrong. Like Zuckerberg thought the metaverse was like a place for us to do digital work, and it's like, sir, we don't need more spaces to do work. We need more spaces to like take a load off. So yeah, I think thankfully we've kind of moved on from this idea of what we thought, a metaverse would be.
yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness. But
I know. I'm
yeah.
I'm, I'm happy to see it go.
But as you say, there's still that element of metaverse around, and it could be that it kind of comes around
Yeah,
again in a different format, but it's kind of different from what they envisaged
yeah,
2020, 2021. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
And you are a strategic advisor at Discord. What is Discord, and what are the main things that you advise on?
Discord is a chat platform, I think, is for lack of a better term. I think I heard someone describe it as a gaming platform the other day. So somewhere between a gaming platform and a chat platform. It has, if you are a gamer, if you've been playing games for a long time, really been the go-to platform for gamers to use to be able to chat to their community kind of across spaces. So if I'm playing on Steam and someone else is playing on PlayStation, or we're playing different games or whatever, we could still meet on Discord and have our community and communicate even though we're playing different things. What do I advise on? Good question. Not sure what I can say. I advise on policy, internal and front facing policy around how we can make these spaces safer and more equitable and just more fun places to be, how they can support the users in better ways, and what that looks like, whether it's education or whether it's policy change or whether it's tooling, and what that looks like. I've only been there for 6 weeks. So I like to tell people I'm the truth, which is I'm still doing the training that says, like, if you see a mop bucket in the hallway, who do you call? Like, I'm still in that phase of the job. So I haven't gotten full in yet.
And so Discord, just to kind of go back to what it is, because I
Yes.
only really went on the platform because you spoke about it when I was initially having our initial
Oh,
catch up.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and I had no idea it even existed before because I'm not a gamer.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, and for
Yes.
those who don't know about Discord, so you
Yes.
say people go there on there to chat. So is it, say, there's a Fortnite game and you can play on various different platforms. I'm going to use the word platforms for lack of a better word, or different,
Mhm.
whether it's on
Servers.
PlayStation or yeah, or stream or in VR.
Yeah.
So do people chat about the game, or what do they
Great
actually use
question.
it for? What do
Yes.
you
Oh, I wish I could just show you my Discord now, but people in my Discord would be like, "What are you doing?" So Discord can be about anything. It's always been initially a platform for gamers, but you can have a Discord on anything. For instance, I have a Discord server that is dedicated to the editors and the authors of the Psychgeist of Pop Culture book series. So I make a server, and then I can make individual channels. So I have a channel for the editors, I have a channel for the authors, and then I have individual channels for the books, like Stranger Things authors, Taylor Swift authors, whatever. And then there's like general chat, or there's share a picture of your dog channel or whatever. And everybody goes in there and you talk about, you have the channels dedicated. I'm only going to talk about this here and this here. And then you have kind of broad channels, but you can have them around games. You can have them around books. You can have them around your knitting club. I actually have a Discord too for my neighborhood friends. So the kids can all talk to each other, because the interesting thing about Discord is that they are invite only servers. So I'm going to make one, and the only people who are coming in, like, a stranger can't wander in there. Like, they have to be invited to be able to come into the space, which is, I think, a really kind of cool and unique thing about it. It's not like the AOL chat rooms of the 90s. Um, they're really kind of curated communities around a central theme, which tends to be a lot of gaming ones in that.
because that's what I had in my head of AOL communities of the 90s.
Yeah.
Free for
Yeah.
all. So it's,
Not
if
like
I
that.
had to think about it in my headspace, it's almost like
Yeah.
having lots of different WhatsApp groups on one screen that you can
On
invite
one
people
screen. Yes.
to only talk about that specific thing, and you've got another group that talks about that specific thing. So it's almost like WhatsApp groups, but they're placed out all on one screen. If I had to,
Place that all in
my
one. Yeah,
language.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like big groups, but then you have individual smaller groups inside the big group.
Yeah. Okay. So I get it
Yeah.
now. Brilliant. So if parents are kind of their children are looking at Discord, they can say, "Oh no, I now understand why on earth they're on here and why they spend so
Why
much
they're
time on it."
there. Yes, yes. And and there's a lot more functionality. Like, you can make games on Discord now. You can stream video on Discord. You have video chat. And it's funny because we were talking about parents earlier, and I talk a lot about trust and safety and staying safe online and that sort of stuff as well. And usually when parents ask me about Discord, the first question I say is, who is in there? What Discord channels are there in? Because if your kid is on Discord, you should know who's in the channel. So there's my little tidbit of advice for the parents listening. It's cool that your kids are on Discord, but also, who's whose servers are they on, and who's in those servers?
That's really good advice, because a lot of advice we've had previously is for parents to have a family computer in an open space. If their children are playing video online games, they can hear the
Mm-hmm.
conversations and make sure that
Yes.
there's not dodgy conversations. But that's a whole different area of actually who's in the chat room and Discord,
Yes.
and who are they talking to?
Who are they talking to? Yeah. And in Discord too, you can have it on your phone. If your kid has a phone, you can take those communities with you. They're not ephemeral like the play space, like they're kind of evergreen, they're always around. So yeah, it's important to know who's there.
So if someone wants to build a career in cyber psychology and
Hmm.
specializing in kind of gaming and mental health, what would your advice be to them in terms of what they research or what they'd study or how they'd actually get into this field?
There's a lot to do in this field. So please come to this field. There's a lot of work to be done. Um, I think the best advice I would give someone trying to get into this field is meet the other people doing it. I'm a firm believer in it's more in who you know than what you know. Obviously, you have to know some things, But for instance, when I was doing my PhD, I just made a commitment to myself. No one told me to do this, that I was going to do one big conference and one local conference every year of the 4 years of my PhD. And now, at this stage in my career, 10, 15 years later, the people who were PhD students who I would meet randomly around the world at these conferences are leading labs at universities. Like, these are your cohorts, these are your people. And that's how you'll get a job, is knowing these people. So I would say meet the people who are doing this space. Digital communities, Discord. There's Discord communities for people who are studying games. The IGDA too, I believe, has a Discord, the International Game Developers Association. So find these communities and meet the other people who are doing it. And I think that will actually serve you so much more than anything else.
Do you think if someone wanted to go into cyber psychology of games and or digital online activity should go through a psychology pathway and start with the undergrad in psychology and then
Great
move into a
question.
master's or a PhD or a doctorate?
It's so, I don't know if I'd recommend a doctorate to anyone. And I say, well, if you really want to. It's so multidisciplinary. You don't have to do psychology. I love psychology. It's always been my passion. I'm always that's where I am. I'm so curious about the individual experience. But from the people I work with, there's lots of sociologists. Communication studies is very well represented in game studies. There's degrees now in just like UX design, game design, computer science. So you don't necessarily have to do psychology, but if you want to do mental health, psychology probably makes sense that's the way that you would go. But you don't necessarily have to be pigeonholed, and you don't necessarily have to have a PhD. I would say an advanced degree, maybe a master's, certainly helps. A PhD helps you get your foot in the door. I don't know if it'll make you better at your job. It depends on what job you're trying to do. If you're trying to do research, then certainly I guess a PhD would be the way. But there's so many opportunities in this space that don't necessarily require all the degrees.
But some postgrad probably is a good idea, and especially if you're going
Probably
into mental
helpful.
health.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as I
Oh,
was
for sure, for sure.
yeah, because I was thinking when you're talking about user design, and actually that might be a really great way to do mental health, because understanding how a game actually works and then doing a postgrad in
Yes.
the mental health side of it, it's a double edge of this is how it works and this is how it impacts you. It's a really
Yes.
insightful way.
There's so much interest now in game design. Thriving in Games Group, which used to be called the Fair Play Alliance, this year released their digital thriving playbook. You can Google it and you'll find it, which is essentially can game mechanics change the way that people are engaging in this space and what they're taking away from it. And it's exactly that. And it's really a growing field. So if you are interested in mental health, but you're also interested in maybe game design and working real more industry side, I think that is a huge wide open space for development.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, there's so much need for people to come into the space.
Yeah.
Desperate.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Rachel, we're coming to the end of our interview, and there's three standard questions I normally ask all my guests. And the first is, what is the most important question I haven't asked you yet?
Oh, the most important question you haven't asked me yet. I would say, do I like what I do? Is maybe a good question. And I do like what I do. I love what I do. And I know I said don't go to graduate school. That's cynical. I am grateful for every opportunity that afforded to me, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. I never in a million years would imagine that this would be my job and I would be paid to talk about video games, and it's really wonderful. So, I mean, if you want a career in this space, highly recommend pursuing it because it is just as great as it.
And if you're passionate about games and gaming,
Yeah,
this is a great way
yeah,
to live in that space. So,
absolutely.
the second last question, there is often a frustration among cyber psychologists around media misinformation and journalists who take academic findings and sensationalize them to foster kind of clickbait articles, moral panic, and negative social narratives around digital technology. Do you think the media is getting better or worse at accurately presenting sound academic findings, and especially around the world of gaming?
It's not getting better. I don't know if it's getting worse. I think it's just the same, which is worse because like we know better. I talk a lot about moral panic and how, in the beginning, sure, fine. I guess you didn't really know what was happening, but now games, we've been studying them very practically for like 50 years. And we know a lot of things, especially if we want to talk about like video game and violence effects, for instance. And we still see sensationalized headlines when a crime occurs. He played video games, which is essentially saying like he wore shoes, right? Because like everyone plays games and whatever. Um, I would not say they're getting better. It's real sad. I will say we're seeing more headlines talking about the positive mental impact of games for sure, but we're not seeing a decline in those negative. So net neutral, maybe.
Net neutral, absolutely. So hopefully they'll start swaying in the realm of
Yeah,
actually it
I
is
hope so.
positive. Yes, there
Yeah,
can be real
yeah.
positives to gaming. And Rachel, just the last question is, do you have any particular cyber psychology books outside of the lovely books that you produce? Do you have any
Yes.
cyber psychology books or books on gaming that you would recommend to people who want to read more about
Ooh,
your field of expertise?
good question. The first one that came to mind, there's a book called I think it's called The Psychology of Video Games. It's by Celia Hodent. It's a little tiny book. It's got a black cover. It comes from the Psychology of series from Routledge. And why I recommend that one is because it's a really short read and it gives you a little bit of everything in games and science career. So it's like a little bit on games and mental health, a little bit on UX, a little bit on design, a little bit on ethics, a little bit on toxicity. It gives you a little bit of everything. So that would be my recommendation.
Rachel, thank you so much for your time and for joining me on the Professions of a Cyber Psychologist. It's been so fabulous to catch up with you and find out more about the science of gaming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.